Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Good afternoon. I'm Jay Kahn, the mayor of Keene, and thank you for taking time out of your day. Election day, remember? So please vote. This is an important meeting to discuss a shared route that many of us in Cheshire County use on a regular basis. We are all, I think, concerned about the safety on Route 9. It's been addressed on many occasions in the past by multiple parties, whether it be the city or the state Department of Transportation, their district office, and other municipalities, towns in the region. So the increasing frequency and severity of the accidents that have been experienced on Route 9 are of concern to all of us. And our session today is to try to identify, are there some short and long-term ideas that can be worked on beyond this meeting? So I'm not expecting, I hope nobody is expecting that today is a set of outcomes that will be implemented. This is more, let's generate the ideas so that the parties that can influence the solutions can come together and propose those back to us in the future. We have a fairly tight timeline in 90 minutes, and the outline that's been prepared is, if anybody needs an outline of the agenda, they are here. Please grab one. So I'm going to try to adhere to that. I'd like to recognize one of our city councilors, Randy Filio, who has been instrumental both as a vice chair of the Municipal Services, Infrastructure, and Facilities Committee of the city, and one who has brought to the attention of that committee the need to have this meeting. So Randy, you probably prepared a few thoughts. I'll offer you the mic.
Just briefly, I wanted to thank Mayor Kahn, the city manager, and city staff for facilitating this meeting so rapidly after I wrote the letter, and to the Department of Transportation for being here, and all the first responders that are here to respond, and especially to the public that is here, because I always say silence is never an option, and when we get together as a group and do things happen, and that's it. This meeting is not all about me. It was just a collection of comments that I heard from a lot of people, especially from Chesterfield and that side of Keene, about the accident. So hopefully we can make some progress here to a better solution. And once again, I appreciate DOT coming over from Concord today to talk to us about it. Thank you all for being here.
And indeed, the responsiveness of our city manager, Elizabeth Ferlin, the Director of Public Works, Don Lucier, and their partners with the State Department of Transportation. That really was a quick turnaround from the writing of a letter to the convening of a meeting of this sort. So thank you for pulling this together. Thank you all for being participants that need to be here to listen and offer ideas. So the next portion of this session is to ask the Keene Police Department to provide us with an overview of some accident trends that they've observed in the recent past. So I'd like to recognize Chief Steve Stewart.
Key speaker. You want to take it? Hi, I'm Steve Stewart. Is this on?
No, this one is.
This one's on. Steve Stewart, I'm the police chief here in Keene. I'm just going to give you a sort of a quick overview of some of what we're seeing there. I don't know that we have data, given the current format and parameters, that necessarily support an increase in serious traffic accidents, but it is a persistent problem and a problem nonetheless. I'm going to turn over the microphone to Lieutenant Joel Chittister, who's our investigations, our detective lieutenant, and he's also in charge of our collision analysis team, which investigates all the serious motor vehicle accidents in the city, which means someone was severely injured or killed. So, here you go, Joel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming here this morning or today to discuss this. As the Chief said, I'm in charge of the Keene Police Collision Analysis Team to respond to all crashes with serious bodily injury or fatalities here in the city of Keene. As he indicated, the data that we would show in Keene at least would indicate that looking at the section of Route 9 from Keene to Brattleboro, there's not necessarily been an increase in serious or fatal crashes in that stretch of road. However, we know that our neighbors to the west, Spofford, Chesterfield, have seen some pretty horrific crashes over the recent past, and there's nothing that makes Keene immune from that, right? It's the same road in Keene or in Spofford, it's just where the crash occurs. Looking at it from a collision analysis perspective, certainly our partners at DOT will get into this in more detail. I mean, there's roadway safety concerns for some of the side streets. There's different things that maybe could be done to help prevent some of these collisions from occurring. The rest of them are ones that are, maybe environmental. I think some of the crash data shows maybe some animal collisions, things like that, which may range from both minor crashes through the more severe. But those are some of the safety concerns that kind of persist along this stretch of roadway. If there's any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those now or at the end from a collision standpoint. Otherwise, thank you for attending today, and hopefully we can do our part to make this section of the roadway safer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one quick question. Is all your data based on post-accident investigations, or is there any kind of preemptive survey going on of what traffic movement along the route is like? Are you guys noting the people making a third lane going up the hill on the west side of the hill, excessive speed, that kind of thing?
So through my role, all of my investigations would be post-collision, because that's where we, police department, come in. I would refer the balance of that question to DOT and our public works department as far as like the actual traffic surveys and studies that they perform. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'll just ask in advance, because it doesn't seem like Chesterfield has been coordinated with on this. Is there an opportunity for us to have a Chesterfield meeting about the Route 9 from Keene line to Brattleboro? Because there is an increase in the accidents and deaths and fatalities. And my driveway comes right off Route 9 near the junction of 63 and 9, so I know that from personal experience.
So again, I'll refer that to the organizers of the meeting and to DOT that covered that specifics. Speaking again for myself and specifically the Keene police section, I can't really answer that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's true.
If I may, I'm on the planning board and I was part of the subcommittee on the planning board of Chesterfield. So I'm on the planning board of Chesterfield and the subcommittee that talked about this several years ago before the most recent spate of accidents. We came up with a set of recommendations, and I'm speaking for myself right now, I can't speak for the planning board, but at that time, that subcommittee came up with a series of recommendations that was sent to the SWPRC and the NHDOT. I have copies for everybody if you'd like to look at what our recommendations were. They considered commerce and safety and how we could, for a very low budget, go and fix the vast majority of what's actually happening on the highways. So if you're interested, I have that. I would strongly suggest that the NHDOT work with us. We got absolutely no response from this.
We need a meeting.
Pardon?
We need a meeting in Chesterfield.
Right, but we have requested this before. We have provided our recommendations. We got zero response from either organization.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Officer. I know that Senator Fenton is in the House, and Donovan, if I know you're on a tight timeline too. So, any thoughts that you'd like to offer? Apparently so.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief today. I want to hear from the experts. The governor did convene a highway safety task force to look at the accidents we have been having, and she did appoint me to that, so I'm honored to be a part of that. And what we're looking at is three main factors: is distracted driving, driving under the influence, and speed. And wrong way driving is kind of what we're seeing. The first report has come out, and it was heavily leaning towards how we fix driving under the influence. So there's a lot of bills happening in the legislature dealing with that right now. I also have bills dealing with distracted driving and trying to tackle that portion, but you know, it's not localized just to Keene and Chesterfield. It's kind of across New Hampshire, but Chester County has been hit hard by this. And you know, you talk about your driveway being right off the highway, you know, that's a lot of places. And as cars are getting, you know, faster and, you know, bigger and things like that, these are things we have to address, especially in New Hampshire, because a lot of our roads weren't built to be like highways, but yet we drive them at speeds of highway speeds. So, you know, when we're asking questions today, I'm going to try and ask some questions as well, how we can address this, how the Highway Safety Task Force can address this. If you guys have questions for me, or you know, that letter as well, please share it with me. You know, I can work with agencies as well to try and implement some of that. So thank you all for being here. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Don. And to the person who's at that intersection, having driven over there a couple of times in the last couple of months, I don't know how we correct poor driving habits. And you must observe it on a regular basis. I just observed it coming and going, but people don't stop at the stop sign at Route 63. They just come through, and boy, if you're coming over the hill going to the east, it's pretty dangerous. There's a question back here.
I hope it fits somewhere in this whole conversation, but speaking about driveways coming down to 9. I live on Daniels Hill, Langley Road up there. That's our whole road's driveway, because everyone that lives up there has to cross or turn on to 9. And at least 4 families, since we lived there for 35 years, so it's probably more, but at least 4 of us have had serious accidents crossing Route 9. And at one of these meetings we went to at Town Hall, there was nothing they could do about it because it's a state highway, while our local residents are in danger every time they cross that, you know, even looking both ways. And now they are building, I just saw they are building, they're digging a hole for the basement for the little new neighborhood just south of the rail trail on Whitcomb Mill. And that with huge trucks and in and out there, and more homes, and the teeny little one-lane bridge that goes over Whitcomb Mill, all services will be affected, and the traffic will be really altered too, for the worse. So I just wanted to put that on the record, that we all have like the driveway situation in one way or another when going out.
Thanks for offering that hotspot.
If I could add to that, I live up there on Daniels Hill Road. Last June, when it was...
Would it help people if folks identified themselves?
You want me to hang around? I'm happy to
Yeah,
go over it.
sure. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to address the comment that Marcy just made. Fred Burgess, Daniels Hill Road, Keene.
Thank you.
And Marcy Selke, she just spoke. Last June, my wife and I were returning from a doctor's appointment. It was about 7:10 in the morning, and I was making a turn onto Daniels Hill Road from Route 9. There is no turn lane there, and the speed limit after you go through the roundabout at Base Hill Road increases to 55 miles an hour. And what you find is traffic there is variable. Sometimes it's none, but during, like, what I would say, rush hours in the morning when people are heading to work or heading home at night, there can be quite a stream of traffic that comes through. It makes it very hard to make a turn. So you end up having to stop in the middle of the road and trust that people are either going to stop behind you or go around you. When we stopped there that morning, I'm looking in my rearview mirror and I see a pickup, not a pickup truck, a dump truck hauling a tractor come flying by me and just barely fit because they're up against the guardrail and me, and I had pulled over all the way to the left to avoid getting into the other lane. Fortunately, he missed me, but the next one didn't. And I was rear-ended. Fortunately, I wasn't pushed into the oncoming traffic, but my car was totaled. And I think what we really need there at the minimum is to put in a turning lane so that we can stop at the road and have some safety to get out of the traffic flow. As it is right now, every time we go there, I develop PTSD watching my rearview mirror and trying to plan what my next move would be to avoid being crashed into again. It may have been distracted driving that hit me, but there's not much I can do about that. And with the speed limit being 55 miles an hour, you're at great risk. So I really think it needs to be addressed sooner.
And thanks for offering a suggestion that folks can be looking at, and folks, as you identify hotspots, issues, the ideas that you have for improvements are appreciated.
Yep, Mark Doucette, retired truck driver, lived in Swansea. From 2008 till 24, I commuted every day to Dummerston. Drive tractor trailers, a lot of times I would get the Keene run and coming back, so I'm going over the road 4 times in the course of the day. When you put the traffic circle in at Base Hill, you can put a climbing lane in for the trucks.
Bingo.
Yes.
That slows you down. We have to slow way down to go around the circle. And Daniels Hill, it definitely should be a turn lane there in Whitcomb's Mill Road, I believe. It seems like there's enough room on the road to put a turn lane in and mark it accordingly. And they shortened the climbing lane on Chesterfield Hill going west. Now, at the bottom of the hill, before you get to Chesterfield Road, they have it so you can only turn right there. So the trucks have to wait till you get past Chesterfield Road to get over, to get out of everybody's way so they can pass. And also on the other end in Chesterfield, just east of Stage Road, you climbing up towards the industrial park in Chesterfield. They shortened that climbing lane also. And then past there, I think it's Twin Brook Road up to 63, they eliminated that climbing lane for the trucks too. You have a lot of trucks coming out of that industrial park, and they don't have a climbing lane to use anymore. And I've witnessed 2 head-ons on Route 9, both in Chesterfield, over my years, and I don't know what the situation is, but distracted driving is definitely at the top of the list. Thank you.
Just point out, because we're on a time schedule here, I don't know if you all have the schedule here. Every day, when all the emergency responders are done speaking, the last issue on the agenda is that for public input and comment and your feelings on things. So if we could, just for the sake of time, if we could allow our first responders and the DOT to do their presentation, and then when they're done, like I said, it's on the agenda where questions and answers and comments will be here in the effort of time here. We don't want to run out of time and not have everybody be able to get their comments in. Thank you.
The good news is, so far, we're 1 minute ahead. I'd like to recognize then the Keene Fire Department, and Jason Martin, the chief, is here to offer some response from emergency responders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, my name is Jason Martin, the fire chief in Keene. I just want to echo what the police department said, because we work very closely with the police department on any accident in Keene with serious bodily injury. That I don't have the data to show that we've had an increase in motor vehicle accidents, but what I can say is that when there is a motor vehicle accident on that stretch of road, it's usually very serious. So that's, that's a little better. So the accidents on that stretch of road tend to be very serious when there is one. So being out of town a little bit, we kind of send the cavalry to at the same time on an initial call. So again, I can't echo that that the number has gone up, but I know the severity over the last few years has been there. And then wanted to touch a little bit on the August 17th accident. It was near the top of Chesterfield Hill. There was a total of 7 patients, and that's why it got classified as a mass casualty incident, is because the number of patients just exceeded what resources we had in the city of Keene. But the reason I want to touch on that is that can happen on any stretch through there. That can be any accident, because basically it was 3 vehicles, 7 patients, and we have 3 ambulances. So that's not only going to tax our resources, but resources in the region. So much more detail anybody would like me to get into that, but that's the overview of the accident. Does anybody have any questions?
I wonder, people were mentioning a couple of the hot spots around Chesterfield Hill, either the approach up or the drive down. Do you have some observations about some safety conditions that might be improved?
I don't have data in front of me right now, but what I would say is probably any intersection is a hotspot, meaning Daniels Hill Road, Whitcomb's Mill Road, the bottom of Chesterfield Hill, and then it's not an intersection, but at the top, where it just seems to be, that's where, and this is not a professional, it's just my own personal opinion, is that it's a tight spot coming from the Chesterfield side, and there's a lot of people trying to make a last minute pass to get up over the top on the corner.
Chief, you go out to 63, as far west as 63.
Can't hear.
Speak up, please.
His question was, does the Keene Fire Department cover the area out to 63 in Chesterfield? The answer is yes, with the ambulance. So we go to the town line with our rescue and fire. We cover ambulance to Route 63. We will go with fire and rescue, mutual aid if requested.
That's reassuring. Any other questions for Chief Martin? We can stay ahead of schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Our next speakers are from Keene Public Works. Let's hear.
Can everybody hear me if I just talk loud? Yeah. All right, good. So earlier you heard Lieutenant Chidester talk about the most recent, like last 3 years worth of data. The graphic up here is something we pulled out of our roadway safety action plan that we completed last winter. That plan used data from the 2013 to 2022 time period. I don't have any of the newer data that Joe was talking about, but that's what this graphic is showing. And it's showing the accidents along the state highways. So it's broken down, and I know you can't probably see it from your seats, but feel free to come take a look at it after the meeting. It's broken down with symbols by severity. So you've got fatal accidents are a red triangle. Suspected serious injuries are a yellow square, and then the black crosses are minor injuries. In these little boxes, I had our consultant break out in a little more detail what the contributing factors were that contributed to those accidents. I know we've heard distracted driving a couple of times already today, and that does actually bear out in the state's accident reports. Oh, I should back up and say, the data that we used for that plan was from the Department of Safety. So it's the accident data collected by the DMV, basically. Distracted driving was the #1 contributing factor. Of the 68 accidents that happened along the Route 9 corridor, a total of 26 of them cited distracted driving as a contributing factor, including 5 of the fatal / serious injury accidents and 21 minor injury accidents. So yeah, that is definitely true. What we're all suspecting and seeing with our own experience is shown out in the data. So that's some background historic data. The other thing I wanted to talk about, again, you probably won't be able to tell the difference in the shades of green. This year, the city council gave us some funding to basically subscribe to a big data traffic information service. What we can pull out of that is things like speed data, traffic counts, turning movements, that sort of thing. Mostly it's used for engineering purposes, but it's also helpful for questions like this. So this graph shows the speed through the corridor over the past 12 months. Basically, the long and short of it is you've got speeds between 57 and 64 miles an hour. When engineers talk about speeds, they're generally talking about the 85th percentile. And if any of you have ever gone to an MSFI meeting, you've probably heard me wax philosophic about the 85th percentile, and that being the sort of like the natural speed that a reasonable, prudent and driver wants to drive, that feels comfortable driving that corridor. I know people really like to just put up signs and lower the speed limit. What the studies show again and again and again is that lowering the speed limit, if you're not changing the roadway to make it less comfortable to drive fast, you're not going to change behavior. So what the data is showing us is that people feel comfortable driving that corridor 60, 62, 64 miles an hour. And that's what the 85th percentile speed shows. And as you get to the roundabout at Base Hill Road, it slows way down, and it's slow through the T intersection, and then as you leave the T intersection, of course, it ramps back up, right up until you get to the town line. So that's the speed issue. I will say, and you know, I'll ask my friends in law enforcement to close their ears, but for an engineer, a 85th percentile speed that's a few miles an hour above the posted speed limit, that's kind of about right. That's about what we'd expect. If we were seeing an 85th percentile speed of 70 miles an hour, I'd say, whoa, that's a big problem. But the fact that the 85th percentile is you know, about 5 miles an hour over the posted limit, I think most people are driving at a reasonable speed through the corridor. So this data, at least, doesn't show me that that's a huge problem. The last thing I was going to talk about is that roadway safety action plan that we did last year. And I should give a shout out to Frank Lindenbringer, Bill Lambert from DOT. Both of them helped with producing that plan. So thank you for that. I pulled out from that report the 9 recommendations that we received from the public, from consultants doing the analysis. It was kind of a, you know, we gathered survey data, a bunch of different sources. There were 9 different recommendations that came out of that plan along the Route 9 corridor specifically. 2 of them, this makes me very happy, 2 of them were calling for conversion of intersections to roundabouts. One of them is already in the planning stages. That's the T intersection. That is on DOT's docket to convert that to a roundabout at some point in the near future.
Where is that?
The T intersection, that's where 9, 10, 12, 101 all meet near Home Depot. The other one that they are recommending from the report is the Washington Street intersection. That could also be a roundabout, for what it's worth. 3 of the recommendations related to left turn lanes, and I know I heard somebody comment about left turns onto Daniels Hill and Wickham's Mill. The other locations that were noted were Sullivan Road and Chesterfield Road, being locations that it's very difficult to make a left turn onto those streets or out of those streets, or vice versa. And the other recommendations were sort of general traffic calming, crosswalk locations, that sort of thing. But the big ones were left turns, intersection improvements, and the last one was lighting. I know DOT has removed lighting from some of the intersections, and that was done many years ago. I don't know if maybe there's an opportunity with LED lighting being a lot cheaper to run if we could revisit that question, but that was the last of those recommendations. So happy to take any questions specific to my stuff, or I will move on.
Oh, you got a couple.
Damn it.
Val Starbucks. Can you hear me through the Val Starbucks?
Oh, I just turned it around.
Hi, Val Starbuck. The data that you were talking about initially and the 85th percentile, how old a standard is that?
The standard 85th percentile?
Yeah.
Right.
That's kind of standard practice for engineering.
For years and years and years.
Yes.
With now, the factors change with the standard, like distracted driving and cell phone use and texting. So I'm just curious as to how you look at that standard with the factors that are increasing and changing all the time.
So let me answer that by explaining what that standard actually talks about. So 85th percentile speed means that 85% of drivers are driving at or below that speed. So when I look at a segment and it says that the 85th percentile on that segment is 62 miles an hour, for example, 85 out of every 100 drivers are going 62 or less, and 15 are going more than that speed. So that's why it's a good rule of thumb that 85% of people are decent, reasonable, prudent drivers. 15% are jerks, right? You're not going to, there's really no engineering solution for that 15%. If people want to drive irresponsibly, that's not something that an engineer can solve. That's why we look at it that way.
My only point was 85% may not have been so bad when there were fewer factors involved, like distracted driving. But now, if that many people still are, that far over the 55 limit or the 50 limit, and plus you add in the other factors, then maybe that number is a little high now. Maybe we should be shooting.
You think I'm giving people too much credit that 85% aren't reasonable?
Yeah.
Just as
you might have a great point.
Just to add a little color to that, the federal standards that all of our highways are built to actually build all highways to the 98th percentile. So when he says 85th percentile is reasonable and that's a great number, it's because every highway in the United States that receives federal funding, which includes all of Route 9, is actually built to standards that could sustain much higher speeds at a reasonable safety level. So if the highway is actually the cause of the problem, and that's actually a problem, that means that the highway is structurally deficient by federal regulations because the highway was designed for much higher speeds.
Thank you, Don. Bill Beauregard, former Keene resident, currently a Chesterfield resident. You mentioned statistics for distracted driving. What about unsafe, aggressive driving? I go back and forth to Chesterfield several times a day. About 2 weeks ago, I was headed back to Chesterfield, and I was passed in the breakdown lane by someone who passed on my right, continued on past several other cars, and on up Chesterfield Hill was passing cars in the breakdown lane. Do you have any numbers for that, for people who probably shouldn't be driving?
So aggressive drivers isn't one of the contributing factors or categories that's recorded in the data. We do have speeding as a contributing factor, and of those, 3 of the fatal or serious injury accidents had speeding as a contributing factor, and 1 of the minor injuries had speeding as a contributing factor. But aggressive driving per se is not one of the categories that's captured in the traffic reports. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So next up in your outline, the Department of Safety and State Police, input from Troop C.
Good afternoon, my name is Sean Eaton. I'm the commander of the State Police barracks right here in Keene, Troop C, and we would like to meet that 15%. So State Police patrol Route 9 quite frequently. We work closely with the Keene Police Department, with the Chesterfield Police Department, with the Sheriff's Office, all of our local partners. I won't rehash anything that everybody's already said. We haven't seen, again, like a huge uptick with the frequency of crashes, but as we've already mentioned, when they happen on Route 9, it can be extremely serious, and that's something our goal is to prevent. We work with our Office of Highway Safety. Our goal is driving to zero, right? Anybody heard of that campaign? The goal is to get 0 fatalities on our roadways each year.
unfortunately. This year we're already up well past 100 statewide. So that is what our troopers' goal is when we're out there. We're working to deter crashes by enforcing the laws that we have. So like I said, we want to meet that 15%. Some of the efforts that we do to try to curb crashes and decrease unsafe driving is saturation patrols with Office of Highway Safety. We get grant-funded patrols to enforce DUIs, distracted driving, and speeding. And that's all in addition to our troopers' regular work schedule of conducting patrols throughout Cheshire and Sullivan County anyways. We regularly make public postings on social media to try to inform the public of those efforts and let people know that we are out there and we are trying to stop these things from happening. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, that's pretty much it. I guess, let me touch on some of the safety things I've seen over the years. Out on Route 9, when I started with the state police almost 20 years ago, head-on crashes out on Route 9 in Nelson were tremendous problem for us. In recent years, DOT put in a center rumble strip that has helped with head-on encroachment a lot. So now we're seeing the crashes related to intersections and things like that more frequently. The lights out on Route 9 and 63 have been a great benefit, and try to think of other. What's that?
I don't think that's true.
I don't
No.
We don't know. We live in Chesterfield and have to deal with 63 every single time we want to leave our home.
Yeah.
And people coming over that hill from Brattleboro,
Ignore that point.
they totally ignore the fact that there is an intersection there with cars trying to get out.
Well, I think
More often than not, I have to turn onto the side of the road, and the people coming over that hill are either on my bumper honking their horn because I did come out, or they're creating another lane to pass me as I pull over the side of the road,
Yeah.
unable to move.
where's the cop when you need one, right? But we are out there trying to make a difference when we see that aggressive driving. Some of the legislative changes recently that have made our jobs a little bit easier. It's become a little bit easier to cite people after a crash. So if we determine that there was a motor vehicle violation, which a lot of times there is, that leads to a crash, we can issue them a ticket for that on scene. If it's at the officer's discretion, obviously, but before we would have to do a warrant and a complaint and submit it to the court. Now we can just like a speeding ticket on the side of the road, we can issue that. So we've been utilizing that tool. We're working on, we are utilizing administrative requests for suspension. So for when we encounter somebody that's driving improperly, and it could also be for health reasons or something along those lines, but we can send a letter to the DMV and request the driver's license be suspended, or they have another driving hearing, or they are retested. So those are some tools that we're using specifically with those very aggressive drivers, 100 plus. The penalties are increasing for that. That was a legislative change January. The penalties for reckless driving for driving 100 plus is increasing. So there's, we're trying to make this approach from all fronts. But what questions do you have for state police?
So one of the things I see constantly, especially in Chesterfield and especially at the merge of the passing lanes, is nobody signals their merges. There's no yielding from the slower traffic merging in. And because of the way especially the westbound is designed, it induces all of the traffic into the passing lane and nobody pulls over. And in New Hampshire, regardless of how fast you're driving, it's completely immaterial at this point. It's illegal to drive in any left-hand lane of which you could be driving in a more right-hand lane. That also includes passing lanes. Has the state police, Chesterfield and Keene, done any enforcement of any of these three things? Because I have yet to see it. And if you did those one simple enforcement, the vast majority of the accidents that happen at the top of Chesterfield Hill go away instantly, and your speeds will decrease, because it's precisely the fact that people are trying to make passes because they know they can't make any more passes anywhere else, that the aggressive driving is induced and the accidents occur. So if you were to enforce those three things, you will actually lower speeds on Chesterfield Hill and you will increase safety. But the DOT, in addition, took off the dotted lines at the top of the road and took away any indication that you have to yield and merge properly. So as a result, there's no indication to anybody that they need to merge. So even self-driving cars have no idea that they even need to put on their turn signal, let alone yield, because of the way it's designed. And it's up to the state police to go and enforce it and speak to the NHDOT because they induced the problem at the top of the hill. Okay? So I would suggest that the state police, Keene, Chesterfield, and even Westmoreland, because they're at the top of that state police, all three need to work aggressively to solve the actual problem, which is people are in the left-hand lane causing aggressive driving as a result of the fact that they're obstructing and failing to signal their merges and yield when they're supposed to.
Sure, so yeah, driving in the left lane or staying in the left lane is illegal if you're going below the posted speed limit.
No, there is no speed limit requirement anymore as of 3 years ago.
Okay, well, that's new to me, and I've been in the office, so I'm sure the troopers are aware.
I will happily show you the RSA.
I know where to find it, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we do the best we can with what we got. We're looking to target problem areas, so where there are high crashes. I would say aggressive driving is, you know, it's hard to say that it's induced by somebody else, right? You have to take accountability for your own behavior when you're driving. So, but I can see how the frustration can lead to
You're ignoring behaviorism. You're sitting at the bottom of Chesterfield Hill, catching speeders coming down while it's already a single lane, instead of enforcing at the top of the hill where the bad driving has occurred. If you're sitting at the top of the hill, as a state police officer,
on Katie Lane as well. Troopers sit on Katie Lane as well.
That's not where the problem is. The problem is right at the top, right at the cell phone tower. If you were to sit there and sight down and ticket everybody that is lane hogging the left-hand lane, everybody that accelerates in a vehicle that doesn't need to accelerate to block people from passing them, because the vast majority of people get in the right-hand lane, they accelerate from below the speed limit at the bottom up the hill to block traffic, number 2. Number 3, ticket and cite every single person that doesn't signal a merge and doesn't yield to the merge lane correctly. If you were to sit at the top of the hill, that's 95% of what actually happens at risk on Chesterfield Hill. Not sitting down at the bottom ticketing people for speeding or sitting on Caddy Lane ticketing people for speeding.
So you don't want us to sit at the bottom of the hill where the
I want you to focus on where the actual problems are occurring. And you have a mass casualty event that happened at one of the problems that I'm talking about. So if you were to enforce there, the mass casualty event would never have happened, as an example.
Okay, thank you for your input. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I just want to thank the state police because I think I've heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you've been supporting Chesterfield while we're down several police officers. So I really do appreciate that very much from the state. And I also appreciate a bigger presence of police cars, even with the non-so-lifelike dummies. But you know what? A lot of people from out of state, they don't know that. Those of us who live there or travel all the time, we know it, but it doesn't matter. It still slows the traffic down. So over the last year, I've noticed an increase in that since some really fatal accidents, terrible fatal accidents in the last year. But I do appreciate the state police for lending Chesterfield a hand with.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to speak for Chesterfield PD, but we do work very closely with them. They've had some personnel issues over the past year, and troopers have been entered into an agreement with them to provide shift coverage. They do deploy a decoy car. At one point it was just the chief. I'm happy to say that they are getting back up to staff, so they'll be relying a lot less on us. But that was, again, in addition to the troopers' regular schedule. They're out there working and patrolling Route 9 while we're covering out there as well. So thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I actually have a question about the decoy part. Has there been a study on the effectiveness of when that has been placed, specifically on Route 9 in Chesterfield?
Yeah, I don't know if there's been a study that I can cite. I'm not aware of one, but I believe it lends to just a general presence.
It almost got me one time. I was driving out there, I was gonna pull in and say hi, and I realized it was like the mannequin. I'm like, okay, have a nice shift, pal. But it does create a presence, and at least for that very much, it's the same thing when, you know, the troopers are out, we have our computers in the car, you know, I encourage the guys to do the reports on the side of the road, because at least you have a presence there. They might not be watching traffic at that very moment, but the drivers don't know that. They see a cruiser, they slow down, that's our goal. Yes, sir.
I don't know about the logistics of this. Has there been any talks about cameras or has there been any talks about camera use of like security camera, traffic cameras, you know, pre-cameras?
That's more in the legislative realm, which I'm not as familiar with. I know there has been talks over recent years of the use of LPRs, and that's been, which is license plate readers. That's been a hurdle for law enforcement. You know, New Hampshire, we certainly respect our privacy. So I guess that would be a question for someone in the legislature. But thank you for that, though. Yes, ma'am.
You're going to have to speak up.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Kelsey. I'm a Chesterfield resident.
We'll have a conversation back.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelsey. I'm a Chesterfield resident. I live on Gulf Road, which is about as far as you can get before you hit the Great Bridge to go into Brattleboro. So I travel really all of Route 9 from Bratt to Keene daily. And I'm wondering, I've had a lot of incidents in the last year and a half where I encounter an extremely aggressive driver or somebody who might be like under the influence, who's creating a safety hazard, like actively in the roadway. Sorry, I'm a little cold. And so I'm wondering, is it helpful, and can you speak a little bit on what happens when a driver calls in either to the PD or to 911 to say, is there, or to say like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, I'm concerned, you know, this is the car, this is the direction it's going, like, what generally happens when people do that? I've had to do it 2 times. Both times with like my kids in the car, I've been passed very aggressively on the right-hand side in the breakdown lane, and then also like following like a truck carrying another truck where like the truck was like swaying and like really looked like it might fall off the back of the other truck, and so I was concerned. Sorry. And so I was just wondering what happens when somebody calls in and says, hey, I'm concerned about this or this specific vehicle.
So I already got that. What happens if you call in a hazardous vehicle or a danger? You're certainly able to do that. So New Hampshire's a hands-free state, but if you're making a 911 call to report an emergency, you're certainly allowed to do that. So when that happens, it goes to a dispatch center, depending on the location. They'll send it out to the appropriate police units, and we frequently work together to try to intercept that person and, you know, investigate, take whatever action we need to take. We can make a car stop based on your report, right? There's case law that says we can do that, so we don't necessarily have to see a violation in order to do that. But the more information you can provide, the better of a case we'll be able to put together to identify the person, stop them, see what's going on, see if they're impaired, try to, you know, it depends on the circumstances, but you're certainly encouraged to do that. The license plate, the description of the car, direction of travel, these are all things that dispatcher's gonna ask you. And then again, if, say you're coming in from Vermont in your neck of the woods, and, you know, Chesterfield's, you know, down the south end of town or something, it may come to state police, it may come to Keene police, so we all work collaboratively to try to intercept that person and make sure that people are getting where they're going safely.
I guess it makes me feel better that based on the description that's given, that you're able to make a motor vehicle stop, I guess to investigate whatever the safety concern was that brought that call in. I guess that was sort of what I was looking for was, would you have to observe something after somebody made a call, or could you stop that vehicle if you feel like you've accurately identified it and sort of investigate that claim, whatever it may be. So that makes
We
me feel
could.
better. I appreciate that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and they may ask for your information, because if it turns into a criminal case, we may want to use you as a witness because you identified that poor driving or whatever the concern was that led to calling. So that's always helpful as well. You can make an anonymous call. The courts, look at that as a little bit less credible. It doesn't mean, it doesn't change the fact that we're still going to go out and look for this person, right? We may be able to just build a case on ourselves. So don't hesitate to call. I mean, we're here to help. And at the very least, I mean, I've had, cases where somebody passed illegally, and then I come across the car, they're driving normally, right? Maybe it's a road rage thing. I just pull them over and have a conversation about that. And at the very least, it lets them know that other people are watching them and that behavior is not okay. Because our goal, again, it's not to write tickets and increase revenue, right? It's to change driver behavior. That's what we're trying to do here, to decrease all these crashes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what is your position on dash cams, and because I mean, that's shocking that people are passing in the breakdown lanes, it's shocking.
I'm for it.
And
yeah,
do the dash cams, can they actually pick up license plates? Because that would really be able to help.
Like a personal cam in your own vehicle?
Yes, yeah.
They certainly can pick up license plates, and I mean, we built cases on having that camera footage.
What's the approximate price on it?
They're pretty affordable. Yeah, I
$100
don't have one myself, but
$200,
probably, I'm sure you could get one for $50.
Well, if I lived in Chesterfield, I'd have one of those for sure.
Well, I can tell you that my wife was hit in the Keene roundabout, and our Tesla has a dash cam in it. We offered the dash cam footage to the Keene police after the suspect fled the scene and ran away. They refused the data.
Well, don't tell me.
No, but I'm telling you that you're claiming that
Hold on.
that's great.
Thank you.
But I can tell you that I have an explicit example of Keene police literally declining the offer of the
The
footage.
guy's right there.
Well,
So-
there's far more to that case that we can have a conversation with later.
Do you want to talk, Chief?
I have no idea why I would use the data. I really
I offered the
dispute
thumbstick
that
on
right
the
now,
table.
and we can talk about that later.
You haven't finished. So we need to move on. Thank you for answering as many questions as you got to. Southwest Regional Planning. This is Todd Warren.
Thank you, Mayor. Todd Warner, Southwest Region Planning Commission. For folks who aren't aware of our organization, aren't familiar with us, we're a nonprofit public sector organization formed by and for municipalities. We assist municipalities in the Monadnock region on public policy and planning issues like transportation. In a moment, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague JB Mack, who manages our transportation program. But I just first want to thank the city for inviting us and Councilor Filio for initiating this meeting today, and for all of you for coming. This meeting is surfacing the fact that there are some real concerns. Maybe we weren't aware of the full extent of those concerns prior to today. So thank you again. And it's also surfacing to me that there may be some communication gaps. There was a letter that was mentioned earlier from the town of Chesterfield Planning Board. It wasn't ignored out of intent, so I look forward to reading it and connecting with you after the meeting today. So I'm going to hand things over to JB to talk a little bit about the services that we offer and how we might be able to add constructively to this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Again, my name is JB Mack. I'm the Transportation Program Manager. So at the Regional Planning Commission, we have a ongoing 2-year contract with New Hampshire DOT to provide transportation planning technical assistance, primarily to the towns. As Todd mentioned, we are a town member organization. So encourage you to contact us if you're looking for resources or looking to do some proactive planning around transportation safety. If I could break down our services into 4 buckets, one would be collecting and analyzing data. So we collect a lot of data actually for the state. We collect speed data, highway speed data, we collect traffic volume, we collect data that tells you how many trucks are on the road in specific areas. And our data can even look at things like if you have a lot of platooning in your area where people are following closely behind each other, look at gaps between vehicles, and there's a lot you can do with those pneumatic rubber tubes that you've probably seen on the road. Another bucket would be connecting stakeholders with informational resources. So we have a very strong relationship with New Hampshire DOT. So consider us as a resource in connecting you to the right people at DOT, whether it's about signage issue or complaint about engineering approach that you don't agree with, one of the things we heard today. So we can get that information and feedback back to DOT, and they can take a look at it. The other thing we can do too is there's a lot of research in traffic safety around something called safety countermeasures, where there's been a lot of studies on different ways of approaching safety problems, whether it's speeding or aggressive driving or what have you. And there's a lot of resources out there about what kind of works, what seems to be working across the country. So we can connect you with that kind of data as well. Another role that we play is, a lot of these projects, we can't just talk about planning, we got to put them into implementation. How do you get them implemented? Well, you might have heard recently or read in the paper that our state is facing a $400 million shortfall in our 10-year plan. So we're not doing so well on the revenue side, but there are avenues to address some of the safety problems, and that's one of our roles that we can play. We are the main entry point to the 10-year plan, to understanding what kind of projects. So if you have concerns about traffic issues on state roads in your community, you should really be communicating that to your select boards and your planning boards, who are solicited every 2 years for transportation project nominations. Now, I can understand in some cases with select boards and planning boards may not know exactly what the solution is. A lot of our region is made up of small towns. You don't have your own engineers like Don working for the city of Keene. We have a newer program that is on-call engineering, where with a community match, we can bring in some engineers for specific projects that we feel have merit to address a safety issue. So if there's an issue, an intersection, that might be a way to get some attention, some professional attention put onto that problem, and we can get it to a point where, at least through conceptual engineering, that you have sort of an idea of what the project might be and what the cost might be. And then you could bring that as more of a stronger candidate into, let's say, the 10-year planning process. There's also something called the road safety audit that the state is doing with federal funding through Highway Safety Improvement Program. I'm sure DOT will talk about this, but over the years, we've worked with communities and the state DOT maintenance district to put forward some applications. One of them was the New Hampshire 9 and 63 intersection, which led to the intersection collision avoidance warning system, which I know some people, there's mixed reviews, but that was, we got engineers in to take a look at it and offer some different solutions there, and started paying attention to that. A newer one is actually Whitcomb's Road. We're working with a firm called VHB and New Hampshire DOT to take a look at making that a safer intersection. And we've heard about a lot of other intersections as well. There's limited resources, so there's a lot of prioritizing that needs to be done, but there are ways to tackle these issues. And then finally, one thing I wanted to mention is that the chart that Don showed earlier comes from a federal program that came out of the Infrastructure Jobs and Investment Act called Safe Roads and Streets for All. And it's some federal funding that allows communities to study, to really do a deep dive in the data to understand what patterns are happening with crashes and come up with solutions. That's what led to the City of Keene's roadway safety plan. We've applied for that money as well. The government shut down now, so we don't know when we're going to hear back. but almost a $500,000 grant from the federal government that we requested that would involve doing some implementation projects on a trial basis, like a pilot basis, to see if certain safety countermeasures could be implemented in our region for certain safety areas around the region. So hopefully we get that funding. It's going to be an investment into the community. We are going to be looking for a lot of public engagement during that process. So keep your eyes peeled. I don't think I'll stop there. And I can take any questions.
Thank you, JB. Looks like the governor.
So, JB, thank you. So, JB, I'm a resident of Chesterfield, and I live just off 63. And in the summertime, when there's an additional traffic from people trying to come from Brattleboro area over to the White Mountains, it's nearly impossible to make a left turn, whether you're coming from North 63 or South 63. Making a left turn, you're taking your life in your hands. I know you promoted the yellow flashing lights, and I'm told by another member of Southwest Region Planning Commission that a roundabout or a light would be impractical because of the hill. So my question is, why can't there be other factors included in a roundabout, such as the striations on the roadway that are in Peterborough at the roundabout where the Shaw's is? There's striations there to warn you that there's a roundabout coming. I've been in the Boston area where there's a big sign that's lit up that says light ahead. Why can't those be considered for the intersection, which is so dangerous for the residents of Chesterfield? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. I probably am going to defer, this isn't a cop-out. I'm not an engineer, but probably ask DOT, anybody from DOT when they step up here to talk about those solutions that we're discussing. When you heard that it was impractical to do like a roundabout or a light, one of the issues is that on the west side of the intersection, there's just a large, as you know, what they call a vertical curve. A very expensive project to try to sort of level that out and make it. But you brought up some other good ideas that I'll make note of them myself and follow up with DOT on, but also encourage DOT if they have time to answer your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect, JB. I'm noticing how much time we have left, so if we could move on to New Hampshire DOT. Thank you. We'll need an introduction.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Introduction, my name is Bill Lambert. I am currently the Highway Safety Act and Transportation Administrator for the DOT. Prior to that, starting in 2000, I was the state traffic engineer. One of the first things I did as state traffic engineer in April 2000 was I came to visit with Chief Milson to look at 63 and 9. So this area has been on my radar for a very long time. I did want to introduce the others from DOT that I have with me today. DOT has a lot of different resources, a lot of different specialties. So with me today, I've got Frank Linenbringer from District 4. He's right down the street here in Base Hill Road in Swansea. Lee Baronis is our state traffic engineer. He replaced me in that role. Corey Spetalunas works with me in the Highway Safety Office, and Emma Bell. So we've got a contingent of here taking a lot of notes. One of the things about being last on the agenda is I get a lot of notes and questions that have come up, so I'll try to address those as best I can. I know that the agenda that we had talked about roadway geometry and things like that. I will say that Route 9 is a major regional arterial. It's been that way for a very long time. It's a very important state route, and because of that, it's probably built to current standards, but current standards is of the 60s and 70s as transportation agencies, to your point, were building to move cars in the post-World War II era further and further and faster and faster. So I would say everything from Brattleboro to Route 89 is probably built to more current standards than most state highways. There's a few sections in Antrim that are probably a little bit less, but for the most part it's fairly straight and flat, wider shoulders for a lot of it. So the geometry is not the issue, it's the way that the people using it are using it. Safety improvements on Route 9. JD talked about the Whitman's Mill Road safety audit. That's still in the process. We've done the field reconnaissance and the internal public input. Our consultant is moving that up in their priority list to come up with a final report and recommendations. The result of those road safety audits is we always identify short, intermediate, and long-term solutions. The short is oftentimes things that either local or state resources can do out of their normal work plan. But when you get into things like the intermediate and the longer term especially, then a lot of times you're looking for capital improvement projects. And JB just talked about the challenges we have with funding some of those types of projects. Yeah, and then JB covered the long-term mechanisms. So the things that I took notes of here, I think somebody mentioned a meeting in Chesterfield. We tend to go to a lot of meetings, and we're more than willing to do that. One of the things that we've been doing for the last 20-something years is myself and our traffic bureau and our district office, I will go to a district every month to look at some of the safety issues that come up. Sometimes if there's significant issues, then we would schedule a specific point and a specific time to meet in a community to talk about something like that. We tend to, the 6 districts in our state, we tend to go to 1 a month. So districts 1 to 6 from January to June, and then again from July to December. So certainly if the town wanted to schedule something to look at specific issues, would be more than willing to do that. I do want to say that coming to this meeting, seeing this crash data, been around for a while. We're not hearing anything new. I think as the state trooper, as Lieutenant Eaton mentioned, we hear these types of complaints routinely on all of these major arterials and a lot of the other numbered state routes. In the last month, I've been addressing things on Route 125, Route 16. Route 16 is a very long route, so it's Route 16 Wakefield, Ospey, Tamworth, Albany, Intervale. All different places that I've heard about in the last month. A couple weeks ago, we were in Charlestown talking about Route 12, Lover's Lane and Route 12, for anybody's familiar with that. So very familiar issues, and as the lieutenant said, it comes down to distraction, impairment, and speed. Those are the three critical areas. Somebody mentioned turn lanes for Daniels Hill Road and Whitcomb Mills Road, and those are certainly things that we can consider. Unfortunately, we need to get better at identifying those early in the process, because we tend to identify those desires or wants when the pavement's black, and then the stripers are at the one end of the road ready to get started. It's kind of late to make major or significant changes at that time, and generally if we're trying to take space from its shoulder to use as a travel lane, the shoulders aren't built to the same standard. They're generally built with less gravel beneath them and less pavement. So sometimes if we're going to use the shoulder as a travel lane, we have to cut that shoulder off, rebuild it to the standard for the travel lanes, and then put the same thickness of pavement on it. So it's something we need to identify earlier, but it's certainly something that can be considered. Speed limits, and I don't want to go into a lot of speed limits. Senator Fenton left, so he doesn't have to hear the story from me again. It's important to note that speed limits start with the legislature. The legislature sets statutory speed limits based on context of roads, and there's 3 or 4 different contexts. Engineers changing to the 85th percentile really should be an exception to that statutory limit, and it hasn't always been the case, but generally that's the way I've been trying to treat it as a state traffic engineer, and I think Lee follows the same policy, is that the legislature sets the speed limit, and they grant the Department of Transportation in towns and on Class 5 roads the authority to change those statutory speed limits, but it has to be based on an engineering and traffic investigation. And somebody asked about the 85th percentile, how long that's been the standard. That goes back to research by David Solomon for Federal Highway in the 1960s. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes from there, and there's certainly those that think that context needs to be more of a consideration in setting speed limits today than it was then. I tend to believe in the 85th percentile because the people that have cited research that shows that changing speed limits based on context makes a difference. They haven't done that over time to see if that difference is sustained. I tend to think that if you lower the speed limit and focus some enforcement on it and attention to it, you might lower the speeds for a little bit, but then over time it's going to come back to that natural speed that people tend to go. We have added rumble strips for Route 9. I know that there was some controversy when we first put them in Chesterfield because we didn't put them in at the right locations on the edge line. The center line, I think that we have broad support for that. We missed a section of Route 9 in Roxbury-Sullivan because of that recent widening project. Those will be in a project that we're advertising. I think we've already advertised it, and it should be constructed next summer, so that will close that gap. There was a fatal crash in Chesterfield this summer, and one of the recommendations that I got was, well, why don't we put up median barriers, a guardrail in the middle like they have in Route 2 in Massachusetts. I kind of want to address the way that would work. When Massachusetts has that section of limited access highway with median barrier, that happens over a long period of time. So they would have had a Route 2 that looks like Route 9, and at some point in time where the crashes are high, they would have restricted crossing and entering the highway to certain points with interchanges, and they would have built those interchanges in the two-lane road. Over time, they continue to have head-on crashes, so they separate those two lanes and put a median barrier in the middle. That you can imagine what kind of a capital project that would be, and then you have to go and deal with all the people that were able to get to and from the highway pretty conveniently now have to find out local connection to get to an interchange. So that's not something that we do overnight. It would be something that happens over time, and New Hampshire's just not funded for that kind of a long-term capital improvement project. Talk a little bit about legislation. I know Lieutenant Eaton mentioned some of the changes that have helped on the enforcement side. I know that there's current legislation being proposed to increase penalties for aggravated DUI that include wrong-way driving and excessive speed. There's been a huge focus, maybe not so much in this part of the state, but a huge focus on the people that are speeding well over 100 miles an hour. And that's bad enough when it's on an interstate that's designed for 70 or better. But can you imagine that we're getting 100-mile-an-hour speeds? I don't know if you've had any in this part of the state, Lieutenant, but Route 16 in Ossipee, Route 25 in Ossipee, Route 16, 120 miles for a motorcycle on Route 28 in Wolfboro. So those excessive speeds are getting to be a huge issue, and that's not a speed limit issue, that's a respect for speed limit issue. There's also legislation to encourage people to comply with the blood and alcohol testing if they're suspected of impaired driving. New Hampshire has the highest percentage of refusal, I believe, of any state in the country, and I think Florida and New Hampshire are back and forth. And what that means is that people can refuse to take a blood test, they get their administrative loss of license, but then they get less of it. It's harder to prosecute. And I'm not the prosecution, but that's the way I understand it, is that people aren't penalized for driving impaired because they're refusing to take that blood and alcohol test. And then somebody also mentioned speed enforcement cameras. That's a long way for New Hampshire to get to that point because we're just not to live free or die and protecting privacy in the state. From our perspective in New Hampshire, at New Hampshire DOT, we're looking to introduce a limited pilot for work zones. We've had people that are hurt in work zones. We see people that aren't slowing down in work zones. We've seen a lot of near misses. And we think there'd be more of a stomach for it if we had a very controlled environment for work zones. There are those that think we should be looking at speed cameras in school zones as well. To me, that's a little bit broader step because the school zones, a lot of the school zone speed limits that we have over time have morphed into schools that are really just driveways, where the school zone speed limits would be ideally for those neighborhood schools where kids are walking and biking. And then road safety audits, I know JB mentioned that. It's all well and good for us to do a road safety audit. We generally don't find anything that surprises us. It helps us get programmed into the highway safety improvement umbrella. That's an umbrella of about $11 million a year in our capital program that we can use specifically for safety projects. But if you get to the recommended countermeasures are those capital improvement projects where you're either adding a lane or putting up a signal or a roundabout, those have to be prioritized with some of the other needs across the state. That's kind of a short list based on what I heard today. Again, we know that there are issues with safety. I think we partner with the people in the law enforcement side. The Department of Transportation is always also on the special task force on highway safety. We're about to update our strategic highway safety plan. We're hoping to include a lot more ongoing stakeholder engagement. And I guess the one last thing, to your point about enforcing the the people that are camping in the left lane. I follow the state police news releases all the time. I always scroll through the comments. Recently this week, state police and Nashville police combined on a targeted enforcement where they pulled over 100 people on the Everett Turnpike and they cited, but they scheduled court appearances for 40 people. But when you look at the comments, whether it's that enforcement effort or anybody that's picked up for an excessive speed, there's always somebody trolling the Facebook page with comments about, well, why don't you deal with the people camping in the left lane? And I go to the lieutenant's point, if they're doing the speed limit, the statute allows them that they're blocking the speed, but it would be very hard to convict somebody that's going the speed limit, because you have to decide, are they actually camping in that lane, or are they closing on somebody to the right of them? Are they coming to the end of the merge and then moving over so that they don't have to fight their way in at the top of the hill? So I understand that that's the law that changed, and Senator Fenton would have been involved in either transportation, House Transportation or Senate Transportation when that was passed. But I think there are people that believe that that's the biggest issue. It's just, first of all, the police have to be there, and then they have to be able to convince the court that that person was violating the law. And as somebody that will drive through the city of Concord in the left lane past several interchanges, I'm doing that because of the friction in the right lane. And I'm generally passing somebody to the right of me, just not at the speed the guy behind me wants to go. So I get that that's what the law says, but it's not as easy as just pulling people over for doing that. I guess that's all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions.
So my first thing, it concerns me about what's going on in Wickham Hill Road, because it's clear that you don't understand what's going on at Wickham Hill Road. Yes, there needs to be a left-hand turn lane, but 95% of that traffic is either to Keene High School or it's to the Cheshire Medical Center from people in Chesterfield or in Brattleboro that are going. And because you don't have an exit on Route 9 to the hospital directly, all Chesterfield traffic to the hospital goes through Wickham Hill Road and through all the back streets, all the way over past the junior middle school, and then around the roundabout, because there is no actual other functional way other than going West Street to get there, or taking Route 9, hanging a left at the T, then hanging a left onto Route 12, and then hanging a right onto 12A. Everybody takes the shortcut through Wickham Hill Road, and that's a 5+ minute savings when you're going to the hospital. So what you actually have at Wickham Hill Road is what I call a second order consequence that I see as a significant problem with the NHDOT all the time, i.e. the Base Hill Road roundabout. You put that in there for traffic calming for Ashbrook, but as a consequence of you putting that in there and not planning ahead for the consequences that that would cause, you now have road rage being induced because, as pointed out, you have no truck lane on the right-hand lane, and you've slowed the trucks down drastically at that roundabout. And so now they're doing 25 to 30 miles an hour all the way to Wickham Hill Road. So you end up inducing rage instead of minimizing the rage. And the best way to minimize rage on highways is to give them an outlet so that they're not enraged, instead of trapping them, which makes it worse. And then they get to Chesterfield Hill, and there is only one passing zone that's viable in all of Chesterfield all the way to Brattleboro. So everybody knows they must pass there, or they are trapped behind whoever they get trapped behind, including slow-moving trucks and things like this. So you've actually induced what's going on in Chesterfield Hill at the top to make it worse as a direct result of the Base Hill roundabout. And that's what I would caution you about, is that in every one of these cases that I'm seeing, you're acting on first order consequence and not thinking about second order consequences.
I'll give the mic to the court after I respond to that. Going back to our capital program is no longer one where we're going to go from Brattleboro to 89 and just improve the whole highway. We tend to build an intersection at a time, and it's hard to do that without having some consequences. We get a lot of issues. We've closed a lot of passing. Somebody mentioned it earlier today. We've shortened or closed a lot of passing zones because they don't meet the current standards as far as length and taper and things like that. But at the same time, those passing lanes that were built for slow-moving trucks, the slow-moving trucks are a very small percentage of the traffic. They become racetracks for the rest of the day. So I understand what you're saying, but in the balance, the overall balance, we're trying to make the road safer all the time for everybody, and not the convenience for that. I very rarely get stuck behind a truck. I mean, there was one trip I made to Keene 6 months or so ago, where there was a very late model truck carrying structural steel probably to a salvage yard. And every upgrade, I swear to God, it was at 25 miles an hour. But they couldn't pass him because there was traffic coming the other way. And then he'd go downhill where I could pass, and he'd be back up to 55 miles an hour. That doesn't happen very often.
50% of the time on Route 9, they had conquered.
Yeah, I mean, I follow.
50% of the time, because there are no passing lanes.
And they have to-
After Granite Lake, there are no passing lanes. And there are very limited passing zones.
And
And
they
as
have
a
to-
result, you get trapped behind timber trucks. So that's not true.
I gotta interrupt. You just talked a lot, and I need.
But that's
we're
a
running-
false
we're-
assertion.
No, it was good comments, but we're running out of time, and if there are other voices that need to be heard, Court?
Yeah, good. Hi, Bill, and of course, Corporal Lundquist. I'm West Chesterfield resident, been there for a while. I'm also retired Public Works. One of the things we've talked about over the years, as you mentioned, there's a couple of important things here. The geo-design of the roadway and context. As we know, Route 9 pretty much is the same kind of layout, over 50+ feet pavement, plus or minus, starting in Brattleboro, going away in Keene and beyond. It also has multiple speed limits, 35, starting out there, 50, then up to 55. And again, what we're talking about is people. And unfortunately, people get comfortable in things. One of the things we've been talking about, I think over the last number of years, is looking at some context into design, looking at how can we create more feeling of tightness, more conflict feeling. And one of the things I think we should be looking at, particularly on Route 9, and I think we have the space, is can we put chicanes in? Can we look at some of those things where it's a more natural slowing down of a traffic, making it more uncomfortable for drivers. So that's something I think long-term with JB and the communities along the way is taking a look at this. How can we make it more uncomfortable? We can deal with paint for a while. Instead of 14-foot lanes, 12-foot lanes, etc. So I think those are some of the things that I know. I appreciate the green book. For those who may know what that is, it's a highway design manual. It's been there, the Bible for us traffic engineers for decades. But I think we're in a different world now, particularly with people. I'm looking for automated autonomous cars because we can take one of the biggest risks out of driving, which is people. So think about, again, conflicts along the road.
Hi, I'd like to bring up the Sullivan Road intersection. You've heard a lot about Chesterfield, which said please go to, right? But to the best of my knowledge, Sullivan Road is the only intersection on Route 9 between I-89 and Brattleboro that's not posted at 45 miles an hour, okay? Route 9 East is posted at 45 miles an hour approaching the intersection with Route 10. Also, Route 10 has a designated turning lane, okay? Immediately after Route 10, Route 9 East is posted at 55 miles an hour until the vicinity of the Granite Gorge ski area, okay? Also, there's 2 lanes going up the hill to the rise before Sullivan Road, okay? Route 9 West is posted warnings of approaching 45 miles an hour close to the top of the rise, above Sullivan Road, okay? The speed limit, though, is posted at 50 miles an hour going uphill. Okay, so why can't we post a 45 mile an hour speed limit going down that rise to Sullivan Road? Okay, speed limits have not been enforced through the Granite Gorge area that I'm aware of. I'm talking Route 10 to Center Street. Also, several residents from Sullivan have complained that the visibility for traffic entering Route 9 from Sullivan Road is impaired by the solid guardrails, okay? Numerous suggestions have been made for return to the wire guardrails to improve the visibility. So, some suggestions. Why not post the intersection with Sullivan Road at 45 miles an hour with warning signs that you're approaching that? Create real turning lanes for going into Sullivan Road from Route 9. What you have there now is just crazy. Okay, replace the solid guardrails with wire guardrails. You know, okay, instead of, or in addition to the enforcement, what about radar speed signs? Make people aware of what they're doing. You know, what a concept, right? But the ideal solution would include flashing yellow light to alert traffic to reduce speed limits out there. And we need to do some enforcement. But this is also a source of some very serious accidents. Last year, the mayor hosted a meeting in Keene other than these wacky paintings on the road, nothing's been done.
Interesting, Bill. I think that we've gotten a lot of questions about the markings in the road, which are pretty minimal and don't really resemble anything that people have seen before.
Yeah, so I think Sullivan Road, that was a cooperative effort between the Keene Public Works and the DOT. And again, it wasn't part of a capital improvement. I think there was what are we gonna do? What can we do? Limited resources. So we essentially pushed the start of the westbound climbing lane beyond Sullivan Road. So that, the way it was before, if you were turning from westbound Route 9 onto Sullivan Road to come into Keene, you'd be pulling into that, to make that left turn lane, as people behind you were pulling, that probably were following you for a while, were pulling into it to go shooting by you up the hill. So you'd be there even with the left turn blinker on, and people would be coming up not realizing you're making a left turn. So pushing that climbing lane to start after Sullivan Road was intended to do just that, to prevent that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because since then, amen. But is there additional work to be done?
There's not anything on our radar. As far as the speed limit, again, that's a road that's built, going back to your point earlier. We design roads with a design speed that's higher than the posted speed limit, and we pick that design speed as to define the minimum standards that we're going to build to, and then we're surprised that people are going faster than the posted speed limit. So it was designed for 60 plus miles an hour, so simply changing the sign at the intersection isn't going to change the character of the road, so it's going to be and if there are speed limits that would drop for intersections in the past, I think if we did some of that TomTom data that we referred to earlier, we would find that people aren't going any slower at those intersections. They only go slower if there's context that changes. And as far as the speed, your speed is, the driver feedback, the speed feedback signs, I don't like to see those at a 55 mile an hour speed limit because that's the fastest you can legally go in New Hampshire. My colleagues told me that maybe not everybody knows that today. I think they're effective if you're coming into a village setting from a high-speed environment where the context of the road starts to change. But if it's, and I saw one in Chesterfield today, but if it's on a 55 mile an hour road, you're not changing the character, you're just reminding people that they're going too fast. So I don't have
Why
much
is that the
confidence
only
in that.
intersection on 9 that's not posted at 45? Answer that question, please.
It's not. We drove that whole route today, and I know Frank Lindenberger said that he drove from Brattleboro to Keene, and there's several fairly significant intersections that we have not lowered the speed limit for, including Route 63 in Chesterfield, which is a lot more traffic than Sullivan Road has.
So, two real quick questions. Who would be responsible for additional markings in the road at that intersection?
If it's maintenance markings, when you're talking about additional markings, anything in particular, or?
I think that the markings that establish the turn lane.
Yeah, there isn't a turn lane for Sullivan. If we wanted to put a turn lane there, that would take probably another resurfacing where we have that blank palette.
I guess I don't know what to call it, because it's pretty indescribable.
Yeah, so the original proposal for that intersection was to add a turn lane. Bill mentioned before, the state has actually removed a lot of the climbing lanes because they didn't meet standards. It was the same situation here where our original proposal went to DOT and it didn't meet their standards for the length of taper and whatnot to have a dedicated turn lane there. So what's out there is kind of a compromise with the real estate, the pavement that we had available to work with. Doing a proper turn lane, I think, would require some repaving and widening of the roadway.
Can there just be some lines in the marking that is there, the pie-shaped thing, that would just announce it a little bit more clearly, that cars should not be using that for a passing lane or anything other than a safety place? I guess that's the question I keep getting. I don't know, maybe the manager, if you're nodding.
You don't have to change Route 9 there to fix that intersection, in my opinion.
I think if you fix the approach from the side roads, that would be a lot better way to go about it. I actually grew up in the house closest to that intersection.
Yeah.
And the steep upward angles of the side roads going to that make it so you cannot see over the guardrail. So growing up, we all had pickups and SUVs because you can't see over the guardrail in a car.
Yeah.
So those were brought up so your car's level, and so that the approach is perpendicular to the highway. That would probably fix that entire issue, because everybody's nervous there doing jackrabbit starts and really weird approaches where you can't see over the guardrail.
Good observation. We've heard that before. Councilor Jones.
Just one quick comment about another gentleman's observations about
The speed limits on Route 9 from Keene to Brattleboro. I've scouted out, not written formally, but there's 6 to 8 speed limit signs, I think closer to 6. Half of them say 50, half of them say 55. I don't know why. Never mind the 35, which is just east of the bridge going up past LaValley's and the liquor store. From there forward to Keene, it's 50 or 55, and that's on both sides. So I don't understand why it has to change. Let's just make it all 50.
I guess again, on the speed limits, I go with the statutory speed limits, so the legislature has set speed limits by context of 30 miles an hour is an urban residence district like this neighborhood, or a business district like Main Street. 35 would be for a rural residence district, and that's on a state road. That's a pretty suburban density. And then all other locations prior to last year, or this year, I guess, were 55 miles an hour. So the statutory speed limit on all of Route 9 would be 55. So the places that are 50 were somewhere in time, somebody complained about the speed, and then my predecessors would have said, well, 50 seems reasonable here. I don't know if there was a robust engineering and traffic investigation, but that's how it happened.
But believe me, nobody goes 50.
Right, so last year we introduced the fourth statutory speed limit of 45 miles an hour. I wrote the legislation, so I'm pretty familiar with it. It's said unapproved rural highways, and the intent would be for like a Route 63, where maybe the engineering and traffic investigation wouldn't justify something less than 55, but 55 is clearly too fast. So that gives us the ability to post those highways at 45 without doing the engineering and traffic investigation. So yeah, we could certainly look at having one uniform speed limit from an enforcement perspective. I think that's better. And I'm not sure what the history of the 50s and the 55s in this section are.
Councilor Jones. Right here.
Thank you. My name is Phil Jones. I'm the city council for Ward 5 in Keene. I'm also a legislator, so I just want to talk about two quick subjects, and I'll make it real fast. One was both Sean and you mentioned the cameras. I did introduce, on behalf of a Keene neighborhood that asked for it last year, I did try to introduce using cameras as enforcement in the state of New Hampshire. Unfortunately, there's many up in the State House who think their privacy is more important than safety, but I understand the bill is coming out this year for the workplace, and that might show that it works, and we can reintroduce that new bill again next year. And I think that'll work. There's 18 states that have camera enforcement, and we were trying to get New Hampshire to be one of them. And the other thing I just want to address real quick, people that live in my ward in Langley Road and Daniels Hill Road, we've been working on different things to do. Tad Lacey couldn't be here today, but he and I have been communicating back and forth. I just sent him a long letter addressing some of the things I'm trying to accomplish for that. If you contact me, I don't want to go into it now, it would be too long. Just contact me and I'll send you a copy of the letter I sent to Tad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, I don't have a bill currently for the speed cameras and work zones. That's something that we're looking to draft what the language would be and find a way that we would facilitate it before we introduce it. But it is something that we're interested in pursuing.
We're about to wrap up, but somebody who hasn't spoken yet.
I don't either. Jeff Scott, Chesterfield, excuse me, one of many, many, many Chesterfield residents here. DOT has heard about a lot of the problems that we've had in town, from Keene to Brattleboro. They did respond very rapidly, 5 or 6 years ago, regarding the rumble strips. You remember that? So I'd like to see some kind of response from DOT, from some suggestions. What can be done to create more safety, stop the accidents, or help to prevent accidents from happening? Make some solutions, come to town, and make a presentation. We'd like to invite you, on behalf of the Chesterfield residents and the select board, we invite you to come to our meeting with solutions. Thank you.
There are quite a few people from Chesterfield.
Because we
So-
see it every day.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you talk about 55-mile-an-hour speed limit signs on the highway. You might as well make it 75-mile-an-hour signs, because that's what the 15% over the rest of us are doing. And you can't expect to have enforcement either by a camera or trooper every 2 miles. So I believe that you need to engineer the road to slow traffic down through the use of roundabouts at various intersections. Glebe Road, where I have to join to come into town. I'm glad that I'm retired now and I don't have to get into the hospital for an emergency case, because I have to sit at Glebe Road at the intersection for 5 to 10 minutes to get out onto to Route 9. And then I have to be concerned about someone coming up my backside. Yeah. So I would like to see a series of roundabouts between Keene and Brattleboro.
Yeah, I guess the comment to that, like I said earlier, the constraint of our current capital improvement program.
I understand.
When we built the roads in the 50s and 60s, in the post-World War II era, I don't think there's anybody in this room that remembers the old Route 9 alignment. When we built those roads, it was just the opposite. How do we move cars further and faster? And that was when we had budgets to build all of these highways. But now we're in a preservation and maintenance of what we have mowed, and there's very limited discretionary funding for doing those kind of. A roundabout would be half of our annual safety budget, just one. And that's if all things line up with right-of-way impacts and all that. So to make those kind of major improvements, I agree with you. The concept that we would have now for building roads would be a lot different than we had 40 or 50 years ago. It's just having the resources to go back and change the existing geometry.
Sure, I understand, and I probably will never see these improvements, but I hope that my grandchildren who come through the area don't have to put up Route 9 and the dams there.
And it sounded like Court had some ideas that made some sense. Bill, thank you for taking some of the heat here. I think one thing that, actually, before you put that down, maybe there are some people that have some ideas that they'd like to follow up. And can we provide a suggestion box? Where should people be directing a thought with a solution idea that you might be able to react to? To whom would you suggest that those communications go?
There's a lot of different places to make those communications. I have business cards with me. I'm happy to leave those with anybody that wants to reach out to me specifically. If I can't answer it within the DOT, I can distribute that to where it belongs. But I wouldn't discount the resource that the Regional Planning Commission is. They tend to be your point of contact for anything transportation related. JB certainly knows how to get a hold of me, as does his staff. I don't want to push things onto him, but I think that's their role. I think they are very good at it, and I think they'd be more than happy to be that intermediary. But if it's certainly, I'm a public servant, you pay my salary, so if you want to send me anything direct, I'd be happy to take that as well.
Okay, those are two good suggestions. I hand up to Danny, haven't seen them yet.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Councilors Jones and Filio and yourself, Mayor, and the city staff for making this dialogue possible. I've been communicating, testifying for 27 years about our specific issue on Daniels Hill Road. I get the feeling something's gonna happen, but the increased city interest and support is very gratifying. So thank you, and thank to our elected officials and city staff.
That's probably a good place to end. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.